Page 6, East River Boogie. We have a boogie woogie here with a whole lot of flats all over everywhere. I look it over, it's 1 page long, treble and bass clef. We're in the key of C major. Make sure you're doing the C major scale at least 1 octave up and down. If you know the scale pretty well, and you can play it without looking at the keyboard, without struggling, go ahead and go 2 octaves. But if you don't know it or you're still struggling with it, just stick with 1 octave. Don't push it. You'll spend a lot of times on scale. There's just a little bit at each day is enough. It'll come over time. And 4/4 time signature. I'm going to take it one hand at a time to see what we got. The right hand starts on middle C here. That puts you in this position. And the flats, they're not part of the position. The key signature tells you what the position is. C major is white keys. So we're sticking here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just using the same finger on the black key as I use on the white key. So it's 2 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And isn't this fun? You get to measure 5, you got to come up here. You got 1 beat rest. It's a D and an E flat. 1, 2. Remember the rules for accidentals. It applies from that point on for the rest of the measure. So both of those E's in that measure are flat, but only that measure. That's why in the next measure they got to give you another flat sign. So it's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2. Rest, rest, and then measure 9. You're up here. G and an A flat. 1. I know it sounds lovely. It's supposed to. Just go with it. 1, 1, 1, 2, and then for measure 13, you got 2 beats rest to come down here. And then measure 17, you got a couple beats rest to come up here for G chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and come down 1. And then back up here. 2. You could, see we have second finger on A, so we're using second finger on A sharp. That's not really a rule to finger it that way, to use the same finger for the black key as you do for the white. It's just convenient. So when you're figuring out a fingering, that's the first thing you try. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to use a different finger. But at first, I'm going to use that. And it works here, so we'll stick with it. Left hand. So it's down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This sounds a little better. So I got this typical boogie woogie pattern going. I measure 9, you come up here. It's the same pattern. And then measure 13, you back down here. And then measure 17, you're up here. 2, 3, 4, 1, then come back down here. Then my third finger. Again, I could use 4 because that's what's on the... But, as I said, there's no rule for that. And if it's more comfortable for you to use third finger, then use third finger. In this case, sometimes even though it's more comfortable to use a different finger, I'll tell you, tough, use this other finger. But in this case, third finger's fine. Doesn't always make sense, but that's music for you. Put the hands together. And here I'm just trying to figure out who's doing what when. And it's just one then. This kind of thing, but measure 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Rest. During the rest, the right hand's got to come up, and the left hand's coming up, but you can reach it. Don't do this. Reach up and hit the F, and then collapse, because you're moving both hands. We have to figure out how are we going to move both hands without messing up the beat. So the right hand has to move here, although I could reach up. But the left hand, I just reach up for that first one. So I'm here, here. And then at the end, or measure 12, I'm here. And 1 beat rest. The right hand's got to come down here, and the left hand comes here. Well, this C is sort of a repeated note, even though there's a rest in between. And remember, I can change fingers on that easily now. Rest. So that's left hand, hopefully, is not a problem here, because it's the same note. The right right hand, you got to focus on that to get it down. The right hand goes here and then here. I do like so. Do it real quick. You can do both hands at the same time, but I try not to if I can avoid it. So I do one hand then the other and measure 13 the other. Okay. Now I measure 16. You're here. During the rest, right hand comes up here and the left hand plays first. So make sure it goes where it needs to go. And as you're playing it, you can move the right hand up. So you can still move one hand at a time if you want to. So measure 16 going on. Rest, get the left hand first, does it now. And measure 18. Immediately after I play the left hand, I'm coming down. During that rest, I'm coming down. So you decide on a fingering. If it's different than the book, pencil it in and stick with it, but then get rid of the hesitations. Keep it nice and slow is fine, but no hesitations. And then we think about the articulation, mainly staccatos. I'm hinging at the here. Short. I'm just bouncing off. Now, this is connected. So you shorten one hand, connect the other. Measure 8. You have staccato left hand and not this. You can go ahead and play the right hand staccato if it'll help you. Technically you wouldn't. You'd hold it out the full beat. Here, so it's down a little bit. That's interpretation. I guess when you're first learning it, you should play it exactly as written, and we can interpret it later, which means you would hold that C down in measure 8, a full count. Even though you lift it up, that's a staccato. Rest, and the same thing in measure 12. Hold that down a full beat. And then later when you get into interpreting it, you can think about playing it staccato too. Measure 17, back to all staccato. I tend to want to play the A sharp and the next to the last measure with third. Just because I'm using third in the left hand and it makes it a little easier. Okay, if that's easier, use it. Here, use third on both. Keep in mind the fingering in the book, or whatever, in the music, is suggestions. Whatever I tell you is a suggestion. If you have a teacher, do what they tell you while you study under them. But technically, you can figure out fingering that works for you. There are some standard fingers that tend to work better. With the scales, use the fingering I show in the scale. But for music, there's all kinds of variations of different ways of fingering things. Now, once I have the articulation out of the way, then the dynamics. MP at the beginning is mezzo piano. Whatever you think sort of soft is. Kind of soft. Both hands. It's kind of like a duet. And then on measure 15 or measure 5, you go up to moderately loud. There's not a lot of difference between moderately soft and moderately loud. Just go up a little bit. Both hands. The right hand's going to come out because it's connected. And then the last line you go up to loud. Both hands. Whatever you think loud is. So that's the dynamics, sort of. Again, once you get into it, you start feeling it. If you feel the dynamics a little bit different, go for it. What's given in the music is a general guide of what to do. Then speed. Well, it depends. Moderatos, it's not fast or slow. Well, if it isn't fast or slow, we'll just call it moderato and be done with it. How do you feel it? It may be the speed of the beat, it may not. I mean, it's the overall feel of the piece, and if that happens to be the speed of the beat, fine. But it's the overall feel of the piece. Slow would be... And even though it's a 1, 2, 3, you think that's slow? Well, the feel of it is, yes. Fast would be... Well, somewhere in the middle. Not like measure 5. How fast is that? About like that, I think. That's one. Speed, maybe you don't play it that fast. You don't have to play it, but slow down if you prefer. You can go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's more like your minor alto. Fine. Now remember the natural accent, the first beat of the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Measure 5. Put in, feel the natural accent. 1, 2. Part of interpreting the music. Now, one marking here I want to point out. You see at the end of the first line there's double bars rather than a single bar. A double bar, if you recall, even if you don't recall, it still is. It's indication of leaving one section of the music and going into another section, like leaving a chapter and going into a new chapter. So that first line is one section, and then the rest of it is another section, sort of. The first line is an introduction. You know, it sets the mood, the harmony and all. You kind of get you what's coming, and then the song actually starts on measure 5. I just want to point that out. You look for these little things because it can have an effect on how you interpret it eventually. It's not really going to affect this one, but it could affect others. Let's play this together very slowly and check the notes and the rhythms. I'm not going to do the louds and softs. I'll do the staccatos and the slurs. I'll give us 4 counts. Now this is after you've learned it. Learn it first and then try it with me, because I put the starting point of the play with me in the description, so you can always come back to the video and go right to that part if you need to or whatever. 1, 2, ready, go. Rest. 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 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4.